Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi denounces Israel's war rhetoric against Iran. He says Tel Aviv is trying to enforce, quote, the law of the jungle.
The acceptance by the international community of the principle of preemptiveness, or the attempt to legitimize it, is in itself a serious matter and must be firmly confronted to avoid the prevalence of the law of the jungle.
Addressing the UN General Assembly, Morsi said the Middle East no longer tolerates Israel's refusal to join the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. He also hit out at Tel Aviv for its irresponsible policies and arbitrary threats. The Egyptian president said all nations have the right to have peaceful nuclear energy programs. Israel has repeatedly threatened to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran says it will give a crushing response to any aggression. To discuss that story a bit further, we're now joined by Mr. Rick Rozov, who is with the Center for Research on Globalization, who's joining us now via Skype from Chicago. Thanks a lot for joining us, sir. Now, I wanted to ask you, firstly, how you assess the relationship between Egypt and Israel, especially since the fall of Mubarak, and especially with this recent speech of President Morsi.
Yeah, the speech today before the General Assembly in the United Nations by newly elected President Morsi appears to signal a significant shift in the Egyptian position, not only vis-a-vis Israel, but I would say in terms of intervening actively against threats by the United States, Israel, and its allies, verbal at this point, perhaps more in the future against Iran and other neighboring countries. Considering the significance of Egypt in the Arab world, having the largest population, this is a very meaningful transition, apparently, and one that I hope President Morsi and his government continue with.
So, Mr. Rozov, how does that equal then with Morsi's government essentially saying that they will keep the quote-unquote peace treaty with Israel alive?
Well, that's not the only impediment to Egypt realizing really its legacy. One that went back to Nasser, of course, as being an independent, non-aligned country, and that hopefully Egypt will reassert itself in that capacity. But it means, first of all, seriously re-examining the Camp David Accords and everything that has followed rather. But it also means the military client state relationship it has with the United States, the fact that it remains a major member of a North Atlantic Treaty Organization partnership program called the Mediterranean Dialogue. To continue along the path of genuine non-alignment and demilitarization of the region, ultimately of the world, Egypt would have to sever its close military ties with the United States and would have to withdraw from the NATO Mediterranean Dialogue program.
So then how significant is Morsi's call for Israel to join the NPT? And on that topic of nuclear non-proliferation, also about the fact that every nation has the right to peaceful nuclear energy.
That's a very good combination of requests or of demands. First of all, it's inexcusable that Israel has remained a non-signatory nation to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty for half a century, practically. And it's the sort of rogue activity of Israel and its major sponsor, of course, the United States. Law of the jungle is an expression that Egypt's Morsi used, and that's not an inaccurate one. That is, the largest beast who feels it can operate with impunity, summarily violates international law, and Israel is certainly doing so in relation to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That's a legitimate demand. It should be taken up seriously by the General Assembly. It should be introduced into the Security Council.
All right, we'll have to leave there for now. There's Mr. Rick Rozov with the Center for Research on Globalization, speaking to us via Skype from Chicago. Sir, we do appreciate your insight here on Press TV.